Hello, friends and neighbors, and welcome. Today is Monday, July the 28th, 2025. And the poem for today is going to come from Marianne Moore, who was an American modernist poet, known for being pretty radically inventive with form. And that's not to say that she threw it out altogether and kind of went the Ezra Pound route of focusing primarily on the action of individual words. She still um, constructed these really elaborate stanzas that were consistent in terms of syllables per line and in terms of break, but that played with things like inconsistent metrical patterns or placing the rhyme on unstressed syllables within a word. A couple things about her. In her lifetime, she received a Pulitzer Prize and a National Book Award for her collected poems in 1951. She, from what I was able to see, appeared to be very well read on her own. She published, volumes of poetry, but also volumes of prose. She wrote more prose than she did poetry. She also, early in her life, I said she was from Kirkwood, Missouri, which is a suburb outside St. Louis. She then moved to Pennsylvania, never married in her life, and lived with her mother, and then they kind of merged with her brother's family, and he was a Presbyterian minister who then, for following his church, they moved to Brooklyn, and I'm told in my research she became a pretty avid Brooklyn Dodgers fan for the remainder of her life. She also worked as a editor and publisher at local poetry magazines and small presses. Appeared to have a fondness for the work of William Carlos Williams, and that was extended back to her. Although she was critical of Hart Crane and James Joyce because their work was more kind of sexually explicit than a lot of the rest of the um, more famous and prominent texts at the time, and so that was something that she felt was kind of harming their modernist project and experimenting with form. So the poem that I would like to read today from Marianne Moore is called Poetry. And this struck me as I was just paging through the large Norton book that I have. Because one, it's called Poetry, so obviously it's about poetry, and it's the first poem that we'll be doing on here that is metatextual in that way. But also because of just simply the strange layout of her stanzas caught my eye, and upon reading and upon further reflection, I noticed that there was a consistent stylistic form to that. So I was really drawn in by that poem this morning. I'll read it, and then I have a couple notes, some of which Moore supplied herself in the publishing of the text, just to say a couple things about what she's doing here. So this is Poetry by Marianne Moore, and it has two publication dates, 1921 and 1935. I too dislike it. There are things that are important beyond all this fiddle. Reading it, however, with a perfect contempt for it, one discovers in it, after all, a place for the genuine. Hands that can grasp, eyes that can dilate, hair that can rise if it must. These things are important, not because a high-sounding interpretation can be put upon them, but because they are useful. When they become so derivative as to become unintelligible, the same thing may be said for all of us, that we do not admire what we cannot understand. The bat holding on upside down or in quest of something to eat, elephants pushing, a wild horse taking a roll, a tireless wolf under a tree, the immovable critic twitching his skin like a horse that feels a flea, the baseball fan, the statistician. Nor is it valid to discriminate against business documents and school books. All these phenomena are important. One must make a distinction, however. When dragged into prominence by half-poets, the result is not poetry, nor till the poets among us can be literalists of the imagination, above insolence and triviality, and can present for inspection imaginary gardens with real toads in them. Shall we have it? In the meantime, if you demand on the one hand the raw material of poetry in all its rawness, and that which is on the other hand genuine, then you are interested in poetry. All right. So within this poem has 4 stanzas, and I hear on the surface level a frustration on behalf of the speaker, right off the bat, declaring that they don't like poetry. And then part of what they don't like about poetry, it seems, is its indefinability as a form or as a genre. The speaker does say right away that they have some respect or some fascination with the ability for the poem to grasp, make hair raise, have an emotional reaction within the reader, but that there's also a danger or disdain for all of the derivative and kind of unintelligible work that's out there as well. And there's an admittance from the speaker that, we cannot admire what we cannot understand. And so that's perhaps part of the disdain that the speaker and others like them are expressing for poetry. Something that's interesting in this printing is there are 2 footnotes, both linked to quoted phrases or lines in here, lines that are placed in quotations, and both of those refer back, it seems, to other texts that Moore was familiar with and had come across in her reading. So the first one is from the Diary of Tolstoy, and this footnote comes at, quote, business documents and school books. The note says, and it's a quotation, "Where the boundary between prose and poetry lies, I shall never be able to understand. The question is raised in manuals of style, yet the answer to it lies beyond me. Poetry is verse, prose is not verse, or else poetry is everything with the exception of business documents and school books." So her reference there to Tolstoy includes an admittance from one of the most prominent and respected writers of world literature that there is a difficulty just in distinguishing these things, right? Poetry is verse, but then he's also not really able in this place to say what verse actually is. So then everything with the exception of business documents and school books, which seems to be a kind of cheeky reference that those things are drained of beauty and life and meaning. You're not going to get somebody having a strong emotional experience reading business documents and school books. But within the context of the poem, it does suggest that it's not valid to discriminate against that. All of them are important. One must make a distinction, however, it says, right? When dragged into prominence by half poets, the result is not poetry. So the next quote then comes a couple lines later, literalists of the imagination. And this note takes us to Yeats's Ideas of Good and Evil. And the note reads this: "The limitation of his view was from the very intensity of his vision. He was a too literal realist of imagination, as others are of nature, because he believed that the figures seen by the mind's eye, when exalted by inspiration, were eternal existences, symbols of divine essences. He hated every grace of style that might obscure their lineaments." And one of the things we know about Yeats is that Yeats was somebody who, just put simply, placed a lot of emphasis and value on the imaginative quality of poetry. He was not one, at least later, who was as interested in its realistic or mimetic qualities. He was interested in its inventive and imaginary or imaginative qualities. And so that leads us then to probably my favorite line in the poem, where the speaker refers to what they think poetry can do, right? Above insolence and triviality, and can present for inspection imaginary gardens with real toads in them. And I really love that phrase and that image, because it, again, is kind of trying to free poetry from what prose is often expected to do, at least at this time, which is to be realist and to represent, to be mimetic. It's trying to free poetry from that, but is also saying that there has to be enough of a connection back to the real world or back to things that we recognize in our daily life and experience in order for it to have that fascinating effect of beauty and emotion. So imaginary gardens, but real toads in them. And I think that's a really nice image that expresses that and puts those two things together. Again, much more that could be said about this poem, but I think for today, that's all that I wanted to talk about. I hope you enjoyed it. And if Marianne Moore is new to you, as she is fairly new to me, I knew a little bit of her before today. Hopefully, we can revisit her again in the future. In the meantime, have a blessed day and peace be with you all.